Hi, this is Andy, and I'm back with another custom hero for Marvel Champions, the living card game. In this case, it is White Tiger. White Tiger, otherwise known as Eva Ayala, is an Avenger, and I think she's technically a new Avenger, but I just give her the Avenger trait here. And I was just captivated from the first time I saw this picture, I think it was. And I was just like, I need to make a custom hero that uses her character, uses her art. And so it's been on my mind for a long time, but I never quite had the mechanic that would just set her apart and be so fun, because I think that's so important. To make a good custom hero, you need to have great art available to you. You have to have a really good idea for kind of that sets her apart and just gives her at least something that's new and innovative, and also she just has to be fun. And so I finally found, I think, at least one, maybe two things that really set her apart, give her just something a little innovative and new. And so so I wanted to show White Tiger. I want to showcase her design, how I designed her, as well as I'm going to go through a bunch of these skill traded cards and show how they work with her, because that's one of the things that she does. She's a very skillful warrior, skillful hero, and so that's represented by a special relationship with any card that has the skill trait. So without further ado, let's just start from the get-go with her hero card. So White Tiger, her alter ego is Eva Ayala. She has 3 recovery. She's a civilian. Her ability is Academy Training. Interrupt. When your turn begins, choose to draw 1 card or get +2 rec until the end of the phase. Look out, I'm learning a lot. Hand size of 6, hit points of 10, very standard there. So from the get-go, you can see she has this little choice. Choose to draw 1 card or get +2 rec until the end of the phase. I really like meaningful choices that each turn, when you have to really think, what's going to be better for me right now. And of course, in your first turn of your game, drawing a card is definitely what you want. But in later turns, if you're injured, below down to maybe 6 or less hit points, you're gonna have to make that hard choice of, do I want to up my recovery right now, or do I need that card? And so I really like that for her. And then switching to her hero side, White Tiger, she has 1 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense. It's a very common stat line for a lot of heroes. Especially in the Guardian cycle and beyond, I think. She's an Avenger, as I said. And again, technically, I think that in the comics, she is a part of the New Avengers. But since there's really nothing to support the idea of New Avengers and Marvel Champions, in this incarnation of White Tiger, she's just going to be considered a full Avenger, or a normal Avenger. That way she really clearly can relate to all the Avenger-based cards that are in the game. And then her ability is On the Prowl. Interrupt. When an enemy initiates an attack against you, choose to deal 2 damage to that enemy or draw 1 card. Limit once per phase. So this is Tomen mi mano, I think that's how you pronounce that. I can lead you to safety. Take my hand. I can lead you to safety. Hand size of 5, hit points of 10. So what I wanted to hear is, I wanted her to feel like many heroes, such as Captain Marvel, for one example, but there's many heroes who are like this. You can totally sound off and let me know of other heroes who do this, who have their hero ability and their alter ego ability are similar, or have a similar vibe. So like Captain Marvel can just straight up make a player draw a card in her alter ego. In her hero form, she can basically cycle a card. So I think she spends an energy resource, which is often going to be from her hand, unless she has Queen Carrier, and draw a new card and heal. So kind of similar is this idea of card draw or card cycling with Captain Marvel. So here I want you to have this similar feeling of every turn, really, if you're in alter ego or you're in hero form, her hero or alter ego ability is going to give you a choice of basically drawing a card or doing something else. There's a little bit of nuance to that, of course, especially with this. Not every turn will there necessarily be an enemy initiating an attack against you, if the villain is stunned. I just like that idea of drawing a card when you get attacked. So it's kind of similar to Spider-Man, who is one of my favorite heroes. So that's White Tiger. That is her hero card. But attached to this very closely is the Tiger Amulet. So this is very similar to Vision. This is a 16th card. And like Vision, it sounds like the designers intended for things like this to not necessarily count against your deck limit, although that's not currently reflected in the rules. And so when I play with her, I don't count this against her deck construction. She should have basically at least 25 non-hero cards with her. But yeah, has a permanent setup. Tiger Amulet, it's an artifact, it's an item. So it will come into play just like that with her. And it says, hero interrupt. When you use one of your basic powers, so that's your attack, thwart, defense, exhaust Tiger Amulet, you get +1 to that power until the end of the round. So this is really fun. So really, in effect, you could think of her as in many ways having 2 thwart, 3 attack, 3 defense, which is really good stats. But of course, she doesn't really have that, because if she uses this to pump up her attack to 3, and then she gets readied by somebody, yeah, she'll be able to attack again for 3, but she couldn't thwart for 2. This is already exhausted and, pumping up her stat. Or similarly, if she defends and uses this to pump up her defense, but then has, there's many things that can ready you from defending or otherwise, the next turn, this might still be exhausted, and so then she doesn't have that bonus to her attack or thwart. So there, again, with choice, there's a lot of really fun choices that the Tiger Amulet involves. So that's White Tiger and her Tiger Amulet. Now with this too, one thing kind of thematically here is that she has this Tiger Amulet. It is core to who she is and to how she got her powers and got started as a superhero, to my understanding. But at the same time, I feel like the thing that I've noticed about her is I feel like I would say that she seems to say, my power is not solely in the amulet. It's not solely coming from this tiger deity that she connects with through the amulet. Rather, that she is a hero in her own right. She's a skilled warrior, trained as an Avenger, through that academy training, as you saw before. And so the amulet is powerful, and it's, integral to how you play with her. At the same time, that's really the only thing that the amulet does, and most other things have to do with her employing her own skills, and using, basically having superpowers that come from what she's gained from the amulet. But she's not just powered by the amulet in the same way that maybe Iron Man is powered by the arc reactor. And so that's kind of my thinking there thematically. All right, next up, these are not in order. Let me do them in order. So we got card 2, I should say, is Power Man. So Power Man is her signature ally. Victor Alvarez is his name, and he is close friends with Eva Ayala in the comics. Very standard stat line in a lot of ways. 3 cost for 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 hit points. He also is an Avenger in Wild, which is typical. But Power Man enters play with 3 chi counters on him, which I think that's how the leadership ally also works. But I designed him before the leadership ally version of Power Man, which is funny, which came out in Mad Titan's Shadow. Great minds think alike, I guess. Not to say that mine's great, but I had the same thought of like, well, he does this stuff with chi. I think he should come in with chi counters. And so then this one says, interrupt. When a hero uses one of their basic powers, remove a chi counter from Power Man. That hero gets +1 to that power for this use, limit once per phase. So essentially he's going to come in with these 3 chi counters. So you just put 3 of your green little counters on him. And so then over the next few turns, probably for your hero, but sometimes for other heroes, you can bump up a stat. So it's defense, attack, or thwart, for that use, not for the whole round. So it's similar but different to the amulet, which does it for the whole round. This one's just for that use, and it's once per phase, but similar. So I want just mechanically to them to connect in that way. But he's really solid. If you think about it, he could thwart for say 6 over the course of his life, and bump up White Tiger to deal another maybe 3 damage or 3 threat removal. So that's not bad. He's really solid. And add to that he is an Avenger. She is an Avenger. So Earth's Mightiest Heroes he's a great target for that. As you're waiting to use his chi counters, you could use Earth's Mightiest Heroes to exhaust him to ready White Tiger and get some more use out of White Tiger and out of Power Man. So Power Man is her signature ally. The next couple of cards are Claws Out. So this is card 3 and card 4. Claws Out is an attack superpower, costs 2, has a physical resource. Hero action, attack. Your attacks gain piercing until the end of the phase. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. For each physical resource you use to pay for this card, deal 2 additional damage to that enemy to a maximum of 9. So you're normally going to pay for this with 2. So for example, if you spent an energy on this energy resource card, you only get 1 damage out of this. That's not good. If you spent a physical resource and a mental resource to pay for this, it's 3 damage. It's piercing. That's not terrible. Sometimes that's all you need it for, is to knock out, say, a tough guard that has 3 hit points. But normally you'd be using, say, a strength to play for this, or whatever, a couple physical resources. In that case, it's 5 damage for just 2 cost, which is not bad. And then beyond that, though, there's the concept of overpaying. So you can just overpay for this card. So if you paid for this card with, say, 3 physical resources, now it's dealing 7 damage. Or 4 resources, it would get to that maximum of 9 damage. So this can be really powerful. There's only 2 copies in the deck. But this is a huge element of how she is. You're going to really be looking for ways to pump up and get the best use out of these. Get just like a full damage out of a Claws Out whenever you can. So Claws Out. And so it's fun that she gets the piercing. That's definitely a theme for her as well, is just to really lean into her idea of being this white tiger with these claws at the end of her fingers. All right, the next card is very similar. It's called Crouching Tiger, 5 and 6. So of course this is a reference to the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That was just fun. I was just thinking of tiger phrases, and I thought that was really fun, and she's clearly crouching here. So Crouching Tiger, 1 cost, mental resource, superpower thwart. Hero action thwart, remove 1 threat from a scheme. So similar to this, how it deals 1 damage. For each mental resource you use to pay for this card, remove 2 additional threat from that scheme to a maximum of 9. This thwart ignores the crisis icon. So while this one was piercing, so essentially ignoring toughness or removing toughness, this one is ignoring the crisis icon, is the kind of extra benefit it has. But again, you could overpay for this. So you could just spend 1 mental resource for this, and that's 3 threat removed instead of just 1. But you could spend 2 mental resources, and now that's 5 threat removed for a 2 cost card at that point, basically. And so you can kind of see the value in this, how it can be useful, especially just depending on your needs. If there's 5 threat on the main scheme and you have a Crouching Tiger, that 1 Crouching Tiger with a couple mental resources could get the job done. And so, that's Crouching Tiger. Same, so basically equivalent to the Claws Out. The next card is 7 and 8. That is Cunning Ambush. And this is where you're gonna see one of the sort of, I think this is innovative on some level, is the idea of really both not just caring about what resources you're spending, but really caring about them, and also like having the ability to overpay. I think that's a little innovative or unique to her. But this part I think is really where I think you'll feel more innovative. This is Cunning Ambush. So this is a 1 cost physical resource attack. This one's a skill, not a superpower. Hero action attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy, 3 damage instead if you paid for this card using a mental resource. So it's a Cunning Ambush. So it's a physical resource that you get from it because it's an attack card, but it's a Cunning Ambush. So you have this idea of like, in this case, she's using her mental skill and cunning to deal extra damage. So you get the kicker with mental resource. You may discard a skill card from your hand to stun that enemy. So just for essentially it's a 1 cost attack for 2 or 3 damage. Not bad. Not amazing, but not bad. But then you could discard another skill like a Cunning Ambush or Combat Training or many of the other skill cards that I'm gonna point out to get a pretty cheap stun on the enemy. So there's several skill cards in her deck, but there's I think 22 unique or different skills in the different aspects and in basic that you could incorporate into her deck while you're deck building. So she's really fun to deck build with as you're trying to see how you could maybe use or not use some of the skill cards that are available. And of course, as new heroes come out, there's more skill cards that I'm sure that will come as it continue to come out through the course of the game that will make her deck building new. And so I like that. It kind of feels a little bit like Miss Marvel in that way, where new heroes are always bringing the opportunity for new cards that interact with her specifically. And the lore is just, this one is mine. I really love that picture is very brutal. So Cunning Ambush. And then again, equivalent to this, you kind of see a theme of cards that kind of match each other. Force of Will. So this is a skill, thwart, hero action, thwart, remove 2 threat from a game, 3 threat instead if you pay for this card, use a physical resource. So she really kind of brings her physicality to this forcefulness of will that she has that really defines her. Then she gets that extra threat removal. And then you may discard a skill card from your hand to confuse the villain. So this is an opportunity to confuse the villain. And so it's equivalent to the Cunning Ambush. It says your time is done. So yeah, so these are the cards that really, that's why I'm going to talk about all these skill traded cards. Because once I stumbled upon the idea of like, wait, there's no other hero or really cards at all in the game that deal with the skill trait. How could this work? I started looking through the skill cards and I was like, oh, this would be fun. This would be fun to see how we can implement them. And I think the skill traded cards just in general have an interesting way that they relate to White Tiger. And so there'll be kind of a layered sense of how these skill cards work for White Tiger. Moving on, so that was card 9 and 10. Cards 11 and 12. This is one of my favorite cards in her kit. It's called Summon the Tiger. So we've had these mental cards, these physical cards, and then the mental that want the physical and the physical that want the mental. This is an energy resource card. It's 0 cost. Summon the Tiger, defense, superpower, hero interrupt, defense. When your hero defends against an attack, it gets +2 defense for that attack. If you paid for this card using an energy resource, ready your hero and draw 1 card. You dare challenge the tiger. It's a flavor text. So this is fun. You could technically use this just to get the buff of +2 defense. That's not terrible, but almost always I'm gonna be looking for that energy resource so that I can get I can ready her for just a single energy resource, and it's drawing me a card back. So there's great cycling that goes on there. So notice though, that's kind of cheeky. It's a 0 cost card, but it says if you pay for this card using, so it's the idea of like you can overpay for any card. And so if you just overpay for this card with an energy resource is how you're going to get that kicker to ready your hero and draw 1 card. So similar to Desperate Defense, definitely better and more, you can be more flexible with it because you could just go straight for the +2 defense and not go for the kicker. But if you can get the kicker, it's just basically always worth it and almost a free defense. So it's actually very similar to Backflip. I would say it's similar to Backflip, maybe a little bit, and it's different, maybe a little bit worse than Backflip, which of course for Spider-Man is just a 0 cost, just, avoid all damage altogether. This has the opportunity to possibly cycle, and yeah, so that's where it's probably worse for the defensiveness, but it has the opportunity to cycle, which is really cool. Summon the Tiger. All right, moving on to then it was card 11 and 12, so 13 and 14. These are really fun. Tiger Strike, one of my favorite pictures in the whole set. So it's a 3 cost. It's an attack. This is a superpower, and it has a wild resource, which is really handy. Because, of course, so many of these cards want specific resources. It's handy to have the wild. Deal 6 damage to an enemy. This is an attack. If you paid for this card using an energy resource, this attack gains piercing and overkill. And she's saying, oh, I want justice. So the energy resource here is cool because, again, so many of the cards have wanted mental, so many have wanted physical. There's an attack card that wants a mental resource. There's an attack card that wants a physical resource. And now there's an attack card that wants an energy resource. And again, it has that piercing, which is kind of a theme for her. In this case, overkill, which is really handy. So this card's fun. If you think about it in relation to Claws Out is more flexible in terms of how much you can spend on it. But if you did overpay for Claws Out by 1, it'd be 3 costs for 7 damage with piercing. This one's only getting you 6 damage piercing, but it does have the overkill. So there's a lot of times I'll use Tiger Strike, maybe just as much or more than Claws Out. And you can kind of, depending on how you've built your deck, maybe in protection, you have a ton of energy resources available to you and not so much physical. And so you might be going for Tiger Strike which doesn't really need the energy resources but gets a little kicker. Whereas Claws Out, you really need to have those physical resources to make it work. All right, and then I think lastly for her own cards are Way of the Tiger. So this is a clutch card across the board. Let's just check it out. So it's a 2-cost upgrade. There's 2 of them. Way of the Tiger. It's a skill. And it's a wild. Hero resource. Exhaust Way of the Tiger. Generate a wild resource for an event. It's a family legacy. One I'll never stop working to honor. So this is similar to the biokinetic polymer suit, I think, from Miss Marvel, which only costs 1. But this one, I think part of the reason that this costs 2 is just her economy is different than Miss Marvel, for one thing. And then the fact that it's a skill, you might not even play both copies of this card. Like usually I'll play the first card that the first time I can afford to play one of these, I'll play it. Because that's going to pay dividends all game. I have so many events in my deck. I'm definitely going to want at least one out there. But the other one, I might just let float in my deck for a while because having a skill available to me is going to allow me to get those stuns and confuses when possible. And then also it's a wild resource, so I could also just use it to pump up a Claws Out or a Crouching Tiger or whatever, get the kicker on something. So it's a very kind of heart of the deck, Way of the Tiger card. And so again, you can kind of see she's like communing with this tiger deity, but it's not considered a superpower. It's like a skill. She has this sense of like, I'm the tiger now, like I am the tiger now. She's more truly the white tiger than this tiger deity is. And so it's more of a skill than it is like a superpower taken from someone else. So I just think that's really cool. I like the idea of like, she just feels very skillful, again, with all the skills that you'll probably add to her deck. So that's her deck. And let me just go through her last cards here. You've got Wrath of the Tiger as her obligation. So again, she has this like antagonistic relationship with the tiger deity, who at first kind of like owns her and lets her like tap into his powers every week if she goes and does things for him. But then eventually she's able to actually dominate through a force of will and control the amulet's powers and doesn't rely on the tiger deity. But it says, give to the Eva Ayala player exhaust Tiger Amulet, which is just kind of annoying. And then Tiger Amulet cannot be readied. Treat your identity's printed text box as if it were blank. Alter ego action, exhaust Eva Ayala, remove Wrath of the Tiger from the game. So this just really kind of hurts you. It doesn't totally cripple you, but especially if it's anywhere other than like the late game, you're gonna want to try and just get rid of this as soon as possible. Go and deal with the tiger just kind of trying to wrestle back control of the amulet and control of his powers and domination over Eva. So that's Wrath of the Tiger. And then this is I really like this Nemesis set. So this is White Tiger Angela Del Toro. And along with this is Multiversal Feud. So I think the idea here is that another universe's White Tiger is possessed with the idea that Eva has stolen her amulet. I think something like this basically happened in the comics. So this says, when revealed, place 3 feud counters here. Force interrupt when White Tiger Angela Del Toro is defeated. Remove a feud counter from here. If the last feud counter was removed, remove each card of the White Tiger Nemesis set from the game. And then White Tiger, she's kind of nasty. She's got Insight 2. She's going to put 2 threat in the main scheme. And then Quick Strike. So she's going to immediately attack you if you're in hero form for 2 damage. Force interrupt when this minion would enter play. Remove the White Tiger Angela Del Toro ally from the game. That's really just a catch thing for if you're playing with, I think it's the Taskmaster scenario where you can have her as an ally. This is almost like she comes in, maybe it's either reveals herself to be from another multiverse and is actually not on your side, or maybe she comes in and kills takes out the Angela Del Toro from this universe. But yeah, that's how she works. Soon, Tia Eva, you can't dodge forever. So I think that Eva is actually her aunt. Is the relationship there. And then there's just this I'll Be There card, 3 copies of it. So it's kind of similar to Hulk's Nemesis, where there's just like 3 of the same event. And this is, when revealed, White Tiger Angela Del Toro activates against you. If White Tiger Angela Del Toro is not in play, search the encounter deck and discard pile for her and put her into play engaged with you. Shuffle the encounter deck. So she's just going to keep coming out and coming after you until basically 3 of these have been removed, and then the whole set gets removed from the game. So it's kind of funny, kind of interesting that the side scheme doesn't have anything else going on, so which kind of might make you think, but like White Tiger herself is really nasty, and her coming back out at you again and again and again can be pretty bad as well. And so I've lost to this Nemesis plenty, even though it's kind of built differently than most Nemesis sets, and has that very unique idea of getting like removed from the game once you kind of get a hold of her and wrestle her down enough times and get into her head that you didn't actually steal her her amulet. And so, yeah, so that's her. So that's White Tiger. She's a lot of fun. I've had a blast with her. She's powerful. She's very powerful, as she should be, because she's a very skilled warrior and is also tapping into some super powered abilities as well. But I hope you enjoy her. If you get a chance to play her, you can see the link to the Google Drive where you can pick up, you can print out these cards at FedEx or whatever. You can also try her out on TTS if you have that tabletop simulator. But I wanted to quickly also go through just some of the skill cards that are available to you that you might want to put into your deck. So I'm usually looking to put in at least a few skill cards if possible, if not like 6 or something. I love having skill cards in there so that you just are much more likely to be able to get the stun or the confused whenever possible from those cards. So let's just go through. I have these in order of release. So what we got here is we have Combat Training, right? And Heroic Intuition are both in the core set. I think these are the only ones in the core set that are not a hero card. You know, they're a aspect or basic card. And so, so they're not hero specific. Of course, she doesn't care at all about other heroes, hero specific skill cards. So she just cares about aspect and basic. But yeah, both of these are good for her, especially Combat Training, I feel like, because it pumps her up to 4 damage that she's usually going to be doing on her turn, which is great. And then Heroic Intuition, of course, is solid too. But yeah, so if I'm running her in Aggression or Justice, I'm usually keeping at least 2 copies of Combat Training, and then, or probably a solid 2 copies of Combat Training, and then Heroic Intuition, probably at least 1 copy, maybe even 2 if I think I'm going to play one on someone else. So this can be handy if you're like maybe playing with someone like Iron Man. Just run like 2 or 3 of these. Throw the first one you get onto Iron Man so he's thwarting for 6 every turn. But then your other copies are not useless. They're actually gonna still help you to trigger those cards. And so that they're not useless. That's the cool thing about these, is that these are cards that are like, you want to look at the value of them is like, is this good in White Tiger's deck? But also extra copies or copies that I'm not necessarily playing that right then are still probably useful just for the kicker. So yeah, Heroic Intuition, Combat Training. In Thor, I don't think Captain America or Miss Marvel had any skill cards, but Thor had Mean Swing. I've not really used this with her because I feel like Skilled Strike, which is a skill card, is better, and there's so many other options in Aggression, but technically this could work for her. Counterintelligence, I've definitely used this with her, running a couple of these, or maybe a Counterintelligence and a Spycraft if you're doing Justice. Like Spycraft, Counterintelligence, and Agent Coulson are really fun, because Agent Coulson, you could play him, grab one of these, and then use this for the kicker for Cunning Ambush or Force of Will, or just play it if that's what you want to play. So these are both skills. The problem with Spycraft, as well as then these other 2, well, Spycraft and Espionage both require a spy character, which, she's not a spy, so like you really need to rely on having like Agent Coulson, Mockingbird, and Nick Fury, and hope you get them at the right time. And so I'm not the biggest fan of these, especially since she has so many other Justice options. I don't normally run these ones. Target Acquired, I really need to remember this one because it's a skill. In some scenarios, this is extremely important. So really, if she's playing against someone like, I think like Nebula, for example, I think is a nasty villain. But I think if there's someone like her where Target Acquired would be super helpful, why not run 2 or 3? Because you could get one down on the board and be protected. Then the other ones you can just use for the kicker. And it's a physical resource, which is usually going to be good for her for getting Claws Out pumped up. So that's Target Acquired. Skilled Strike. I think Skilled Strike and or Skilled Strike came with Doctor Strange, I believe, strangely enough. But this is great for her. Just an 0 cost, easy way to pump her up as she's attacking. When your hero makes a basic attack, it's +2 for that attack, or to get that kicker for her cards. I also really, really like playing hand cannons with her, so that even if there's a minion, she can just pour a bunch of damage into that one attack she makes, clear the minion, but then also get a bunch of damage on the villain. So Skill Strike is great with her, especially if you run hand cannons. Martial Prowess came in Hulk, and this is solid for her. Again, skill. It can be played under any player's control, so you could run 2 or 3 of these in a multiplayer game, get one down for yourself or whoever could best benefit, and then use some of the other ones just for the skill kicker. It generates a physical resource for an attack event, which is going to be solid since you have 6 attack events in her set. Although remember that Cunning Ambush actually wants a mental resource for the extra damage, so you'll probably want to take that into account as you're playing with it. Resourceful is also in Hulk. Usually I'm not finding I need this, just because I'm normally playing her in either Protection, Aggression, or Justice, which all have plenty of great skill cards. But if you're playing Leadership, or if you otherwise just have a reason you think this would be helpful to play, this is a great card for her, because it's both a wild resource and a skill. And she really cares about resource types, and she really cares about skills. So it's a solid card. I don't often play it, I think because I don't know why I don't play it enough. I should play it probably a little bit more. I should probably put 1 or 2 of these in her deck most games. Skilled Investigator, so good. 0 cost, it's a skill, it's a physical resource. She likes a physical resource. She really has no reason not to run at least 2, probably 3 copies of this, even in a solo game of Justice, because that way she gets one out almost immediately. Every side scheme for the rest of the game is going to be generating her cards. In a multiplayer game, of course, you could play those on multiple people, but she doesn't care to have that she has 2 extras in her deck, even in a solo game, because she can get the skill kicker and the physical resource. It's perfect. There's no reason you shouldn't just do a bunch of these, and it just really works for her. She's like she has like that rooftop vibe. She's not as just street level as Daredevil, but she has that rooftop vibe, and so I really love Skilled Investigator for her. Nerves of Steel. I really like this for her. Okay, so this is the reason I like this is it generates an energy resource source for a defense event. So this is a great way to get that energy resource kicker for Summon the Tiger. Wonderful. It's also a skill in protection, which is probably the 3rd best aspect for her as far as access to skill cards. So it's helpful to have this as another skill card. But also, sometimes you run Nerves of Steel, you run like, it's probably the least useful to splash onto other heroes of the cards like Sense of Justice and Martial Prowess that are equivalent. So really it's weird because like you want to have one immediately to get the most value out of it, but it sucks to have 2 or 3 in your deck and have them just like floating through useless. But with her, you can totally run at least 2, maybe 3. Again, get one down early, and the rest of them are just great for triggering the cards that want to see a skill. So I really love that. I love that she's like the only hero who doesn't mind running 2 or 3 Nerves of Steel in her deck. Brute Force. This honestly isn't bad for her, and it's kind of fun because it leans into the idea of piercing. She has 4 attack events that give her piercing, so she doesn't normally need it. But there's times where she doesn't have piercing, and I'm like, and there's a tough enemy, and I feel bad. So it's kind of fun if you wanted to just even lean further into the piercing. Maybe if there's a villain you're playing that has like a ton of toughness, you could really guarantee that you're going to be piercing all the time if you add a couple of brute force into her deck. It's kind of fun because it's a mental resource, so you could use it for the like defensiveness with getting the trigger on Crouching Tiger. But you could also just use it to pump up her attack, but just by playing 1 copy of it. But also it's a skill, so it's a skill that could trigger your cards. Sense of Justice. So this is really, really good for her. Again, running probably at least 2, if not 3 of this, if she's playing a thwart event heavy Justice, which she normally probably is, although it won't always be. So if she wants to, run, say 2 or 3 clear the areas, maybe something else. Like 3 clear the areas, she now has 7 thwart events in her deck because of the 2 force of will and 2 crouching tiger that are already in her deck. Then three clear the area, and that's plenty of thwart events to justify running this. But if you run 2 or 3 of these, you can get one out early, get that long-term value, and then also spend the rest of them for the skill to get the Confuser stun. So Sense of Justice, beautiful for her. I'm almost always running 2 or 3. Hard to ignore. Now this one I like to run because, again, physical resource skill. Straight up, it's good. Protection, I just feel like she has so many fun things she wants to do in protection that sometimes I'm edging this out a little bit. And I feel like sometimes, unless you're really leaning into doing defending hardcore, this isn't going to always be as useful. Also, it's weird because if you're running this card, I feel like I tend to want to get it down as soon as I have it. And so I'm not really looking at it as a skill card so much. So I wouldn't really necessarily, if you're running this, I guess what you could do is run it. If you don't get it early, then maybe don't do that archetype of like defending to get a bunch of value. And you could instead just use it for the skill trait is what you could do with it. But yeah, hard to ignore. Deft Focus. This is an interesting card. Okay, so here's what I would say for this. It's a skill, but the only superpower card that really benefits from this is Tiger Strike, and that's only 2 cards in her whole deck. So it's really unlikely you're gonna get great value playing this down, but it is another skill. So if you really are just hankering to get another skill card in her deck, you could run this. The other thing you could do is if you're playing someone like Claw, who has 3 health, tough minions, a lot of them, then this isn't bad actually, because you could play this. You could play this in, say, like an aggression deck, reduce the cost of Claws Out, and then pay 1 physical resource with like martial prowess, so that Claws Out is now paid for. You've only spent 1 physical resource on it because this reduced the cost, and so you're only dealing 3 damage with Claws Out, but that's all you need to just kill that guard. And so that's where I would use it. It's probably against Claw or someone similar, but otherwise it's usually going to get edged out. Follow through. This works really well with her. It's a skill, mental, it's looking for the excess. So if you're running hand cannons, it could be really handy. And of course, her Tiger Strikes deal excess damage or have overkill. But that being said, there's so many good options, so many things you want to do in aggression that I'm usually only running maybe 1 of this with her. Target practice. I've hardly played leadership with her, and I definitely haven't played like a weapon, allies with weapons archetype yet, but I want to try this out because this is unfortunately so far the only leadership skill card I think that exists. And so I do want to try this archetype. I do want to try that. I think in general, if you're playing leadership with her, you're probably going to run a few of the basic ones, like a Deft Focus, a couple resourcefuls, maybe a target acquired or 2, and just forget about trying to get your skills from leadership, or just forget about that altogether and just use the skill cards that are in your deck to get those. And maybe even just not even play down your Way of the Tigers. Use those as the skill cards to get the trigger. And instead you're playing a bunch of allies and kind of investing in that. So, but anyways, this is target practice. I definitely want to try it out sometime. Ever Vigilant, unfortunately, I don't think she can ever get aerial, which is fine. So this doesn't apply to her. Deflection. This is not bad for her. Again, I think she has so many other things she's probably doing in protection that I think I've run like 1 copy of this a lot of times. Just to have another skill card, and then that's handy as like a, kind of break glass type of thing, just to prevent a bunch of damage when you need to. Deflection is one way to go. Protection it's nice that there's like a lot of avenues. You can do a lot of different things in Justice, Protection, and Aggression and still have great access to skill cards. Making an entrance, I always forget this is a skill. So honestly, I have to build a deck with it. Also, again, Justice does have so many great options that you're not really hurting for skill cards. But man, this could really work with her, especially if you play like these and heroic intuition, maybe some Justice Avengers, which there are now several. You could use Earth's Mightiest Heroes to be like readying her and getting a lot of value out of heroic intuition and her kind of basic thwarting, and play this with that instead of doing sense of justice and clear the area and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of a different justice archetype. And then Shake It Off also does not apply to her generally. I shouldn't say that altogether. If she has guardian allies, hypothetically she could use this, but generally the only time that she would actually use Shake It Off is if she's playing with a guardian hero, like in multiplayer, and that guardian hero is planning to throw honorary guardian on White Tiger. And then so maybe she would run this in protection in that event. I think I would run that in protection if I was playing with, say, Nebula. But yeah, so that's all the skill cards so far. And unfortunately, I don't think Vision added any. I don't think Valkyrie will add any. I don't have Valkyrie yet. And so far, we haven't seen all the Mad Titan Shadows cards, but I don't think any of them have added a skill card, which is unfortunate. So that's a few sets that have not had a skill card most of this cycle, I think, in fact. I don't think Nebula or War Machine maybe had them, unless this is from, I don't remember where Shake It Off's from. But yeah, and so I think this is Venom. This is Venom for sure. Yeah, Shake It Off. But so I'm hopeful that maybe the next cycle, or maybe something that hasn't been revealed yet in Sinister Motives, would have skill cards. She doesn't really need it. Again, like, she's great with justice, aggression, protection. She has lots of options in all those aspects. Leadership is the only aspect where she really still kind of does not have any. But again, you can kind of just move away from that archetype. You don't have to be obsessed with skill cards. In fact, you could just not add any and still be fine. Like, you probably just aren't going to play Cunning Ambush and Force of Will as much, and you're certainly not going to get those kickers very often. But you still could. You have enough skill cards in the deck where hypothetically you could do it. And so that's kind of nice, is that she's not locked into like needing them in the same way, like, so it's not so different from like maybe Iron Man wanting tech cards, where he doesn't need them, but generally he's going to want to tap into the few that are available to him in a given aspect, if they align also with what he's doing. And she's even less like requiring them to really align for her. But yes, that's White Tiger. I really hope you get a chance to play with her, and if you do, that you really enjoy her. Thanks for watching.